When you know how to combine ideas, you can design anything.
What's up, guys? In this video, we are here to talk about design philosophy and artificial intelligence as a thinking machine. So let's set the stage for a little bit. You've probably noticed that there are people that have really figured out how to use AI for designing products and creating marketing material at this point. This is the framework that they are using, and this is the framework that you can use with AI tools in order to develop your products at the level of a global brand, even if you are still a small business. So let's get into it. Let's start with the elephant in the room, which is the big problem that most jewelers have when it comes to design. And that would be that most jewelers zero in on material specs and features only when talking about their products. They might list a product name as a split shank engagement ring with gypsy set accents and a 3-carat Asher cut center stone. And that's the product name. There's no story there. But in the jewelry industry, because there's so much engineering and there's so much trivia that goes into understanding the product at even a basic level, most jewelers treat that as the only information that matters when talking about a product. The problem is when a diamond is forever goes away and the natural diamond market is no longer dictating the rules of engagement for how we sell products to customers, that means that you need to become a great storyteller. You need to be able to come up with your own version of a diamond is forever or any type of emotionally driven storytelling and anchor that to your product and your brand yourself, because it's everyone for themselves now. In the world of AI and e-commerce and all of the disruptions going on, and the fact that a small business can now compete visually with a major brand because of AI, that means that you need to know how to think about this in a brand new way. So this is design philosophy. You'll notice that this is a 3-part framework. We have a color-coded version in AI for jewelers, but this is how you can just think of it in terms of the nuts and bolts, and that it is corresponding to the primary colors of blue, red, and yellow. If we were painters, we would know that an infinite array of colors can be created from the primary colors, and in the same way, this framework functions in a limitless capacity in order to allow you to create anything. So we need to be thinking like a painter. Most jewelers out there are going to be thinking in terms of the features of the piece, the metals that are used, the stones that are used, and the various finishing techniques that may be deployed in order to create a unique piece of jewelry. That all still matters under material specs because we are still making a valuable product that is made out of gold or silver or platinum, and then maybe diamonds or lab diamonds or some other type of gemstone, and then maybe we're using sandblasting or brush finishes in order to capitalize on the vast array of techniques available to us in this craft of jewelry making. Now, where I want you to shift your thinking is, I want you to think like a painter. If we were Michelangelo out in the courtyard painting for whoever had commissioned our work, we would certainly know that we were using oil paints to create that painting. That would just be the baseline idea. Of course, that's how we're going to execute on this idea. We're going to use our materials. We have our canvas and our colored paints, and we're mixing them together, and we're telling a story within the context of that painting. So as a jeweler, I want you to be thinking of the various features that a piece could have, the metals, the stones, the techniques. Those are all just mechanisms for storytelling. We need to set the customer's heart ablaze with storytelling. So everything here in the remainder of the framework, as we get beyond just the material specs of the piece of jewelry, we need to know that these are ways of thinking about how we can create an emotionally driven story for the product that we're trying to sell and imbue that into the design of the piece of jewelry. So let's start at the top with aesthetic. This is a place where we need to begin if we're going to create a collection over time that has a relationship with the market and establishes a real brand. So as we get into this later on, know that aesthetic is setting the tone for what your brand is going to look like. You'll notice that we have a continuum up here, from past, present in the now, to future. You'll notice that any major brand or even smaller businesses that look like they really have it together have continuity in the aesthetic of their design. It's not like there's a mixture of vintage pieces and super contemporary modern minimalist art pieces. They all look like they belong in the same cinematic universe. So whether we're going more Victorian era, if we're going to go with that aesthetic, that's calling back to the past. That's going to speak to a particular type of customer that might have traditional values or wants to hold on to something from a bygone era. That's very powerful for marketing, and it's also never going to go out of style. So think of your more classic or vintage styles landing in the past. Then we have in the future, we have more modern contemporary looks. Something that is super minimalist while leaning heavily into the highest level of craftsmanship for the equipment of our time. That's always going to be leaning more into a future-based contemporary style. And then in the middle, maybe you'll have something that could be classic styles that still capitalize on the technology of our time to have more of a vintage modern piece. There are an endless amount of conversations that we can have regarding where any given brand may fall on this continuum, but the big takeaway here is that I want you to think that every piece that you sell needs to fall within some point on this continuum and then remain consistent there for everything that you're doing in your brand and business if you want to establish some level of continuity. Now that is a creative constraint, that is creating a particular limit, but it's also a point of power for you. If you want to actually build a world, it would need to look like it's more of a Victorian world or more of a futurist cyberpunk world. Wherever it's going to be, it needs to make sense and it needs to feel like the customer can go visit this place and be a part of it. So that's aesthetic. Maybe you're more on the classic side, maybe you're more on the vintage modern side, maybe you're more contemporary. Those are kind of the three checkpoints that you could start to figure out where you're going to land. But again, this is an ocean. Then we have creative concept. This is more of the stories that are told within this world. So if you were like a musician, maybe you'd be thinking, who are my influences? Or what is my inspiration for this unique given piece that lives in this world? That's where the creative concept comes in. So on a product level, when it comes to design philosophy, we are asking the question, what are we making with this piece? This is an ocean as well. This could be everything that inspires you from the type of music that you listen to, or maybe it's a particular style of architecture, or maybe the movie we're making is a sports film, or maybe it's an action movie, or maybe it's a vampire movie that has a Victorian aesthetic. Just understand that you're building a world and aesthetic with an overarching theme that should remain consistent across what you do, and then where you can get unique with the storytelling in any given product. If the product is the brand in microcosm, that is happening in creative concept. You just want to keep in mind that as we are storytellers, we also have a business to run. So for a founder or a designer, you always want to be understanding that this is an art and a science, and it's not only an art project. So we always need to be weighing our passion with demand in the market, and what is actually going to be a good product is going to be the thing that gets you excited to get out of bed in the morning to tell whatever story you want to tell within the aesthetic of a given world, so long as customers actually want to buy that. Because we need to be able to sell these products. So the sweet spot for a given aesthetic, that could be a particular style that is trending. Maybe there's particular stories unfolding out in the zeitgeist of society. Maybe it's another time where vampire movies have gotten big again. That seems to be happening now, and it goes in cycles. So you can align with particular attitudes or things that might be trending, but you also want to have authenticity coming from the visionary founder. People are going to want to resonate with a story emotionally when you're charged up about it as well. So you don't really want to fake it. You don't only want to take an economic approach to designing jewelry products, because there needs to be a soul. There needs to be an emotional aspect that the customer is going to resonate with and make them desire it, make them want it, and then actually put their credit card into an e-com store and buy it, or actually book that appointment with you because they saw that your work as a custom jeweler has a real vibe to it. It feels like it's part of a world, and you really have unique designs that are executed within that world. And there's a lot clearly going on underneath the surface that you're not necessarily beating the customer over the head with in your marketing. You're not over-explaining. You're letting a little bit of a mystery in what inspires you and what influences this creative concept to be that impactful finished painting that somebody like Michelangelo would have finished and unveiled and wowed his customer in his time. So when these three elements are combined is when it gets very powerful. That's when you actually have a design philosophy. Maybe you've heard people describe a product or a brand as having a DNA that is unique. You could see this as brand DNA for a product. You have the aesthetic that is creating the world. You have the materials that you're actually going to create the products out of, and you're using those materials as a painter would use their paint to tell the story within the creative concept. Now, what does this actually have to do with AI? Well, this is how AI is thinking about your products, whether you understand it or not. It is going to organize it into a particular aesthetic. It is going to create shapes and forms to tell that story, and it is going to make it look like it's in yellow gold or has particular gemstones or techniques used. AI combines all of these ideas based on language, the same way I was just describing each of these things now. What's interesting with AI is that it's going to do all of these things automatically. So if you want to actually be able to have control over the relationship with the technology, you need to understand how it's going to be compartmentalizing these ideas. So that way you as a jewelry designer can be evolving along with how AI is impacting jewelry design. So you need to be aware that there are aesthetics that are present in jewelry design that are like the overarching design language of a particular style. You need to know all of the finishing techniques, and you still need to know the different gemstone shapes and what different metals are and what tolerances are and what all that means, because we're actually going to go and make this stuff in real life. That's what makes the jewelry industry unique. Then you need to understand that there's various different art styles. Maybe something is more Art Nouveau, or maybe something is more Art Deco. Do you know the difference between those two things? Art Nouveau is more nature forms, Art Deco is geometric shapes. You need to kind of be an art history major in some ways in this new era. We need to know how we can draw from particular styles or even themes in pop culture in order to synthesize everything together all at once. So when I talk about AI being a thinking machine, that's what it's doing behind the scenes. It's combining these ideas when you communicate with it in order to create images and then make sense of how it would actually make a piece. So if AI is the thinking machine that is combining aesthetic, creative concept, and material specs, and you know that, that means that you can actually sit in the driver's seat of the starship. You can guide that process once you understand. Maybe we are going for more of a vintage aesthetic, and we want it to be platinum, and we want to tell a story of a forest nymph. You can get crazy in creative concept. AI will combine all of those ideas. So the next time you sit down with an AI tool to design some jewelry, start here. Start with your thinking. How are you organizing the idea of what you actually want to design? Are you just listing features and specs and calling that design? Or are you really guiding the process like a true professional at the top level of the industry? Are you thinking in terms of what aesthetic does this land under? What market are we actually going after? And who wants this product? And am I passionate about it? And where is the middle ground of the aesthetic that I can start to develop my own unique brand DNA within? What stories do I want to tell? What materials do I like working with? And does this all come together to actually go after a real customer that will buy this product? That's what you should be thinking of when it comes to design philosophy and AI. This is an ocean, but this is the framework that you use to experiment and explore that ocean. So have fun with this. MasterJeweler AI already knows all of this. So if you experiment with our AI, you're going to be able to automatically kind of have training wheels on as you learn this and experiment with it. It is very fun. So hope you enjoyed this lesson. This is Jesse Corby here at Jeweler's Advantage, and we will see you in the next one.